Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a returning guest, very special guest. His name is Robert Frederick. He operates The Hidden Life is Best, and it's basically he's done so many covered so many of Shakespeare's plays from the writing as written by Sir Francis Bacon, and it's clearly um, clearly Shakespeare did not write all these. I mean, I've done shows with Mark Twain and Robert, and we've covered all these other plays. This will be our sixth show, believe it or not. We've just done one with Sir Francis Bacon and the Gnostic English Empire. That's true. We did Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, The Tempest, and then we did Macbeth as well. But today we are going to cover another one with all kinds of elements to it. And the surface story is really the most lightheaded. It doesn't. It's what's under the surface is the most important stuff in A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually ties into kind of this midsummer paganism too. This movie that came out, but a lot of ties into common culture, Bohemian Grove, Eyes Wide Shut. But we can talk more about that with Robert. So, Robert Frederick, welcome back to the show.
Hi, William. Nice to be back.
Awesome. So, for people who haven't heard our earlier shows, maybe you could talk about your interest in Bacon and just kind of give people a background and then lead into A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Okay, great. Well, basically, as William said, William Shakespeare did not write the plays of William Shakespeare. And that's now become very obvious to a lot of people, because when you look at the historical facts of the matter that are agreed upon, William Shakespeare never wrote a letter. He doesn't seem to have owned a book. Nobody spoke to him about writing. And then the question then becomes, well, then who did write the plays? And that's a whole other world. So there's the evidence about Shakespeare not writing it and that contention. But then the people that know he didn't write it try to figure out who did write it. And I spent a few years looking into that. And the evidence for Francis Bacon being the primary writer of the plays is absolutely overwhelming. And I put it into an essay called The Overwhelming Evidence for Francis Bacon. And it is on patreon.com or substack.com, but it is called The Overwhelming Evidence. Francis Bacon wrote Shakespeare. So check that out. Now, most people that get involved in this realize that it was a group of people that did the Shakespeare plays, partly to give that impression of this overwhelming, colossal genius, this just incredible amount of knowledge. And so that's really the only mystery, is who wrote what. But from my research, I see Francis Bacon as writing a lot of it. And we don't want to go into details for that because there's so many side tracks and side areas, and this topic is enormous, because what it has become clear to me too, after bearing myself in this for years, is that the hoax wasn't because, as a lot of people think, like the Oxfordians and the Marlovians, that they couldn't reveal themselves as a writer because they were aristocrats in the case of Oxford, and aristocrats weren't supposed to be writing for the theater. It was a grubby working class institution. It's actually something much different. And it was that these Shakespeare plays, gave the English people a national identity and ultimately gave them a national poet, along the lines of Homer and Virgil. A poet fit for an empire, and that an empire kind of needs a heart, needs a soul, and they rely on poetry for that. Like, poetry really does speak to our deepest selves, and language is really the core of human consciousness, and poetry is the peak of language. And Bacon was very aware of all this stuff in a conscious way. He's really the world's first true psychologist. And if you get into these plays, or get into the criticism of these plays, the awareness of these plays. It's always the psychological depth of the characters is what impresses people so much. And like Bacon figured out in a certain way how we tick. And he got that from reading the classics. Back in those days, the elite were extremely well educated, and they read all the old books, Plutarch, Aristotle, Plato, the Romans, Virgil, Homer, Seneca, all the plays, Aeschylus and Sophocles. And they're really profound. We don't read the classics much anymore, unless you're very well educated or you're lucky enough to take a class in them. But it's rare that somebody will read, say, Livy or even Machiavelli. I mean, they love Machiavelli. But at any rate, he absorbed this tremendous knowledge of the human mind and what makes us tick. And people like Sigmund Freud says psychoanalysis is Shakespeare made into a science. And Friedrich Nietzsche was deeply influenced by William Shakespeare and the plays. And then you combine that with the occult and this practice of the occult, which is initiation into a secret society and going through initiation and even, practicing the rituals of initiation, which in a certain sense, we're going to get to this topic of MK Ultra, that he put this all together, and because the theater came out of the occult, the theater came out of the secret societies, it came out of the mystery religions, which I don't think were necessarily bad. A lot of researchers, think they're demonic or satanic. Some of them could go that way, but they were really just early humanity expressing themselves, and that they were different mystery religions. But the theater came out of the mystery religions, and that practiced initiation, and that are kind of the source of the occult. So you have Francis Bacon involved with all of this incredible knowledge that he put into the plays, but he also put in, on the surface level, extraordinary patriotism. There's a series of plays called the history plays, and they're designed as just pure propaganda that justify the Tudor regime and really build up the English into a nation. This idea of English exceptionalism that set them off around the world, to go to every single corner of the world and spread their culture, as H.G. Wells just came out and said, and Cecil Rhodes and what's his name with White Man's Burden, really believing that English culture was the best culture and that they needed to spread it around the world. It came out of William Shakespeare. It gave them that sense because William Shakespeare was perhaps the greatest writer of all time in the whole world. And he was just a regular English bloke, from Stratford. Not an aristocrat, not an elitist, not from the cream of the crop, just an Englishman who wrote this incredible poetry and drama. So that is why Shakespeare was hoaxed, because if everyone knew it was Francis Bacon, they never would have worshipped him as a poet, and the meaning of the plays would have been clear. The propaganda aspect of the history plays would have immediately become clear. Their bias towards monarchy and the elite and aristocracy, which is so clear, and their bias against the working class. People have been taught to think Shakespeare's this great humanist, this liberator. In fact, it's completely the opposite, as we're going to see in Midsummer Night's Dream. He really denigrated the working class and glorified monarchy and aristocracy, which is now kind of common way to look at Shakespeare, but it came very late. And this whole idea now, another common idea in Shakespeare criticism, is that the history plays are Tudor propaganda. But it took 350 years for that idea to be spoken. An American named E.M.W. Tilliard wrote a book called Shakespeare History Plays, where he introduced this idea of the history plays as Tudor propaganda. But he didn't criticize Shakespeare for doing it. He just pointed it out, like how blatantly propagandistic these plays are. And when you get into them and really study them from a modern perspective, and as someone who's not worshiping Shakespeare, they're just kind of coldly analyzing these plays, you see how blatantly propagandistic they are, and some incredible speeches. But that's the thing. It is incredible. Like, these words get inside you, and very famous speeches stay with you from the play. Like, you won't remember a whole lot from the play, except for one or two speeches or one or two poems that had an effect on you because you got set up to receive them. You got put into a certain state of receptivity, a state of suggestion, really, which is a term from hypnosis, the suggestibility, and which is what happens in initiation to a secret society. You're put into a suggestible state, and certain ideas are put inside you, and you're changed from that. It really does change you as long as the information continues to come in. But that's why Bacon did Shakespeare, because of the power of theater, the power of poetry, and because he wanted an empire. He was obsessed by empire, again, from reading the classics, which are the empires fighting each other, the Persians against the Greeks, and the Romans against the Phoenicians and Carthaginians and the Gauls and Julius Caesar. He worshipped Julius Caesar. And he had a vision of empire for England, and he writes about it. And that's the thing, is that Bacon always told you what he was doing. And he always told us that he also wrote for adepts, what he called the acroamatic method, which is writing for an inside group. He even said that he does that. And that's where Freemasonry comes in, because he couldn't just rely on poetry and plays. He needed a secret society that could operate under the radar, but was linked to the power structure. And to this day, the head of English Freemasonry is always a royal member, is a member of royalty. I forget, it's the Duke of Kent now. And a lot of kings have been Freemasons, English kings, prime ministers, but almost nobody knows anything about Freemasonry. And they certainly didn't know anything about it 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, or 400 years ago, when it began officially in 1717. Except, interestingly enough, there's an enormous amount of Freemasonry embedded in the Shakespeare plays, which were written in the 1590s and early 1600s. So over 100 years before Freemasonry announced itself to the world, you'll see sustained Masonic imagery in the Shakespeare plays. And I can't find it any earlier than that. It really begins with that, and it begins in earnest with any books about Francis Bacon after he died. Like, because the other big piece of this, or one of the other big pieces, is that Francis Bacon is the father of modern science. He's considered to be the patron saint of the Enlightenment. And he embedded that imagery of light in his work. It's a primary symbol in his work. It's a primary symbol of Freemasonry. And then that became the name of the era that followed the era that he lived in, which was the Renaissance, which was still partly medieval. So it's kind of hard to believe that he was involved in all these things. And that's why instead of taking a break from doing a deep analysis of Midsummer Night's Dream, is to assemble the evidence that he did indeed write the Shakespeare plays. So that's the essay, Overwhelming Evidence, which you can find on Patreon. and also the evidence that he put together modern Freemasonry. And that's at this point a 2-part essay, also on Patreon. Part 2 is Francis Bacon and the Freemasons. My ends are only to make the world my heir. And that's a quote of a speech he delivered. Because during the Elizabethan times, Elizabeth I, Bacon had no official position. He was counsel extraordinaire for the Queen. He was an administrator at Gray's Inn Law School, which is barely involved any work. He sat in Parliament, but Parliament in those days met for 2 weeks a year. Officially, the official story, nobody really knows what he was doing between the ages of like 21 and 45. And those are exactly the years that the Shakespeare plays are known to have been written, like perfectly, exactly. Bacon he didn't even publish any other books, like one book of essays. And in 1605, he started writing about science when he was 45 years old. He didn't start the philosophy of science that culminated in the New Atlantis that totally changed the world until he was in his 40s, because he was doing Shakespeare before that. And that got wrapped up. Queen Elizabeth died and James I came in, and there was a shift, and he became a statesman and rose to power. He became the number 2 man in the kingdom at one point. And that is when the whole science thing began, and his incredible kind of warmongering began. Like, I call him the smartest man who ever lived, but he did a lot of dumb stuff as a statesman and as a scientist. He was actually a really lousy scientist. But we don't want to get too far off track, because we really want to get to A Midsummer Night's Dream. So yeah, contemporary critics like Professor Peter Zagorin wrote a great book called Francis Bacon, where he goes through his life story and then he goes through his philosophy, and he goes through Francis Bacon's study of the ancient myths, because Bacon really understood myth and its power in a way that nobody really recognized until, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud and that crowd. Of course, the poets always noticed it, but they started noticing it in a scientific way, which is how Bacon noticed it, in a poetic way too. What these myths mean to the human mind and human consciousness. And that's what he wound up doing. I say consciously and intentionally, was create new myths, which is supposedly impossible to do. That myths are supposed to bubble up out of our, the distant past. But I think Bacon created myths that we live by, myths like Macbeth and Hamlet. They're just so ingrained in us. But Peter Zagorin noticed how much Bacon talked about empire. And really what needs to happen is that these Shakespeare plays need to be reinterpreted, because biography is always the core of art, or 99% of the time. I suppose it's possible to make art that doesn't involve your life story, but Shakespeare criticism and the Shakespeare industry are so overwhelming that when you get into that world, you'll see this massive world of the history of people analyzing the Shakespeare plays. It's incredible. Just thousands and thousands and thousands of books and hundreds of thousands of articles, and it's global. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, who would have known at the very beginning of the 17th century what would happen with the plays and the British? The British were I'm not saying a full backwater, but they were in the shadow of the French Empire.
100%. 100%. They were a backwater. Their language wasn't even formed. That's the other thing, is people say Bacon revolutionized the English language even without the Shakespeare. As he wrote this book called Essays, very modern style, because he studied language. He was in France, actually, and the French were recreating their language with the Pleiades group. Those people too were, highly educated, very intentionally building up their own language. But yes, it has gone around the world. And I think it's gone around the world because the English Empire took it around the world and Freemasonry took it around the world. But it was designed to go around the world. And I looked into that, I don't know, a year or two ago. Yeah, almost every country puts on Shakespeare plays.
All of
And they certainly can watch
Japan loves them.
Japan.
Is it what's not King Lear? What's the one about the guy who gives his kingdom away?
Yeah.
No, it's King Lear. That is King Lear. Yeah.
What's his name?
That's Ron. Kurosawa did it.
Kurosawa did that. Throne of Blood.
Yeah, tons.
Macbeth. Yeah, they've galvanized the world. It's really incredible. And one of the reasons he did that is because of Freemasonry. So when you're a Freemason, you speak in a secret language that was especially secret 400 years ago. It's not so secret anymore. And Freemasonry is on the decline, probably because of that. And also it's just not as much needed in the modern world. You don't get so much out of it that people used to get out of it. But when a Freemason watches the plays, they see the symbolism and they know that a Freemason wrote the play. And we're going to see that in Midsummer Night's Dream. And then they're bound by blood oath to help their brother. So how would you help your brother Freemason, who's a playwright? You produce the play, you review the play, you stage the play, you act in the play. And that popped into my head a couple years ago. I think when I was talking to you, I mentioned it. And since then, I've just found overwhelming evidence for it. The guy that kicked off the Shakespeare mania in England is a guy named David Garrick, whose name is on theaters all over England now. And he created this thing called the Shakespeare Jubilee to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Shakespeare's death. So it was like mid 1700s, and he was a Freemason. And he made it his life's work to publicize Shakespeare. And that's really when the empire started going in full swing. I mean, it already was huge. You know, they were already certainly in America and many places, but it was really hit stride, even though they lost the war against us. You know, the empire just cruised into the 19th century where it was just enormous. You know, we don't need to go into the history of the British Empire, but David Garrick, the Freemason, made Francis Bacon made William Shakespeare into an enormous star in England. I've heard that that's practically the only plays that were performed in England for decades and decades. People just became obsessed with Shakespeare, and then it spread around the continent, and he's especially huge in America,
no doubt,
where Freemasonry also is big. So that I firmly believe that Bacon made that a part of his plan to grow Shakespeare and grow the empire. It's now been proven, again, like really late to the game, scholars really late to the game analyzing Freemasonry. But it's been proven that every single British regiment all around the world carried a Freemasonic lodge with them. And they often left a lodge in the countries where they were staying. And that's one way they were able to corrupt the local gentry, is bring them into Freemasonry and, you know, get a foothold in the local population. And there's something about Freemasonry where it becomes your extended family. You know, it's pan-national, supranational, in a certain sense, supra-ethnic, but it's very powerful organization because it supplies a certain psychological need in men and physical needs, like actual, you know, food, clothing, and shelter in a sense, because it's good business contacts.
Right.
But there's an essay, I think I mentioned it already, The History of Freemasonry, which is, again, only in the last 20 or 30 years has a modern scholarship caught up to Freemasonry and traced it to Scotland, which is where King James is from. And the connections between King James and Francis Bacon were very strong. So I'm wrapping up that essay soon, but it's called, you could find it, it's called Birth of a Religion, Freemasonry Scottish Origins.
Which is why the Scottish Rite, right?
And then the Scottish Rite, and that which took off in France, but there's a connection between France and Scotland, who were both enemies of England or frenemies. There's a connection between all three via the occult, via the Knights Templar. Freemasonry definitely came out of the Knights Templar, and also the mystery religion of Mithra. So I was saying before that not all the mystery religions were satanic or dark or violent. And the Athenian mystery religion was the Eleusinian mysteries, where people got initiated in large groups. It was community-based. It was feminine. It produced the golden age of Greece, which is medicine, theater, democracy, arithmetic, philosophy, all that amazing stuff. The ground of Christianity. The Greeks really became the people that really embraced Christianity in a big way. And that came out again of the Eleusinian mysteries, which had the same language as Christianity, where you got initiated to be saved and to transform your life and to become virtuous and good and understand life in a deeper way, as compared to the religion of Mithras, the secret mystery religion of Mithras, which was a Roman invention, only for men. There was no community involved. You got repeated initiations. There were graded levels of initiation. It was held in the dark. It was held in caves. There were bloody sacrifices involved in it. Completely different mystery religion than Eleusis. And that's really what Freemasonry is based on. And they found what's called a Tauranium, because the Taurus, the bull was associated with Mithra, because he was a sun god associated with the Persians, but it was really a new invention of the Romans. This is new scholarship now. And that's really the core of Freemasonry in terms of the mystery religions was Mithraism. And it looks like Bacon took that and combined it with the Gnostic, which Mithraism really was pretty Gnostic, combined it with something going on in the Knights Templar and Baphomet, and that whole initiation that the Knights Templar did. And they're the ones that invented modern banking, and they were all about war, and they were all about empire. And I'm working now on also doing Richard III, the last play I'm going to do. But the Templars had a castle in Gaza.
Wow.
Yeah. And England is really supporting this war on Gaza right now, even though they're recognizing the Palestinians as a state. They're supplying weapons and intelligence.
They all are, man. Germany,
Yeah.
US, it's really gross. They're just doing it secretly and under the table.
Yeah, and pretending on the surface that they're so against it. Why we're very upset what you're doing. So yeah, Richard the Lionheart was practically a Knights Templar, and he lived in Gaza. He lived in the Knights Templar castle in Gaza. Okay, so where's my outline? Where are we?
We're just doing background. All that background stuff very important to this whole story.
Yeah,
Midsummer Night's Dream.
So the Freemasonry.
Before you get started, where can people find all these? What's the name of your Substack?
Substack is The Hidden Life is Best.
Okay, so I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Patreon, The Hidden Life is Best, and I have a great website. All praises to my webmaster, Susan. It's called thehiddenlifeisbest.com, and pretty much everything is there. It's grown into quite a lot of stuff. And then the podcasts are on all the podcast apps. I've done 20 podcasts. And I'm
We've been
working-
doing
yeah.
shows for so many years now, Robert, that I remember your first.
Yeah.
I remember your first website. It's not this one. This looks really nice. So
Yeah, she did a
I need
great
to
job.
talk to your webmaster or whatever.
Yeah, she's
This
great.
looks fantastic.
Thank you.
So congratulations on all the episodes and stuff. I saw you on James Delingpole and some of these other podcasts as well. So
Yeah, he was great. I think you were the first person to interview me, William. I called you or reached out to you, and you're like, yeah, definitely. And then you read the Mark Twain book a couple weeks after that.
I did 2 episodes on Mark Twain. Yeah.
And you're the one that noticed Globe Theater. It's called the Globe.
Yeah.
You know, it's by intention.
They thought it all out.
Yeah,
They really did.
They were going to take over the world. And
they were smart, not just in the creation of the plays, but in the promotion and the background and the public, almost like what you have today is like the propagandist.
I think he invented it. I think Bacon invented
really
modern
smart
propaganda. And the other big area here is that he was a spy. He was involved at the core of English intelligence as it was beginning with Guy Francis Walsingham is very famous. Anyone who studies espionage knows the name Francis Walsingham and William Cecil. And Francis Bacon was right there with them as a 15-year-old. He started working for them as a 15-year-old, and he invented a method of cryptography as a 15, 16-year-old of hiding messages in plain script. He was just so brilliant, like just off the chart. Brilliant.
John Dee's around there. So all these magicians that influence the works, all these kind of esoteric books.
And they knew they needed to use psychology to mold the nation, which is what we're going to see in Midsummer Night's Dream. Like, how do you do that? And they were already doing it. They didn't invent that, obviously. And that's what ceremony and pageantry and these fancy clothes and fancy speeches of the aristocracy. And they knew they needed to be popular with the people, which involved, the carrot and the stick. But Bacon took it to a new level with the theater and the propaganda of the theater, which is just so pervasive now. I really feel like it began certainly in the modern era with Shakespeare and Bacon. Because the other playwrights didn't do that kind of stuff. They weren't pro-monarchy and doing all this propaganda for the state that Bacon was.
Yeah, so, he's definitely a state actor. All the bad guys are from their enemies. France, Holland, Scotland, maybe Wales, or I don't even know which one isn't like the bad guy. I don't know.
Well, Wales they joined with, and Henry Tudor, which is the propaganda plays are there to prop up, was Welsh. And John Dee was Welsh.
Okay.
And so there's this whole druidic element in Freemasonry, and that's the Welsh and the Scottish too. I think the reason why the English are so brilliant is that they are Celtic and they are German and they are French and they're also the Norsemen. They combined all these amazing cultures and blended it and
French. You have to say part French.
The French. I meant to say French. I popped over it going for the Norse.
So much of the English languages.
Yeah, and that's why our language
on the French
is the biggest language in the world. Nobody has as many words as the English language, and it's because so many French words came in.
Yeah,
and it is an amazing language. English is phenomenal language, and we owe a lot of that to Francis Bacon. And I think I said before, language really is the key. In the beginning was the word, and Bacon took it, to the ultimate level. And Freemasonry, of course, is based on theatrical language. The initiations are very, very theatrical, and there's just such a tremendous power in the theater, which
it's the same thing you mentioned earlier. It's the suggestibility. Anytime you go into that environment, a temple, a lodge, a theater, as long as it's not a raucous, crazy theater, maybe the Globe was back in the day, but modern theater is quiet. Everybody's quiet.
Yeah.
You are setting yourself up to drink, and you're going in there to drink in that. You're willingly putting
Yeah.
yourself into that phase of darkness or whatever, and to be dazzled and suggested to. There's no question.
Yeah. And there are a lot of techniques for doing that with the music softens you up, the poetry, the lighting, the costumes. They just put you in a state where you can be, you're a very, very suggestible.
Yeah, if you're a really cunning,
Yeah.
kind of sinister person, you've got these people in the palm of your hand, man. Wow.
100%.
Depends how much you want to exercise that. Like, people are willing to go along. They know it's supposedly fiction, but like, you can do a lot of tricks. There's a lot of tricks to be done.
Yes. And we all love stories. We're all taken in by stories. And so on the one hand, it's a little disheartening to see how susceptible we are to propaganda. But on the other hand, it's the human love of stories that's at the key part of it. And we just need to grow our discernment and grow our awareness that you don't want to take in every story at a really deep level. You want to be able to pull back and coldly analyze stories for their symbolic content and their deeper meanings. And we need to teach ourselves that so that we can stay above the level of propaganda, because it's really effective. Propaganda is very, very effective, as we saw during COVID.
Yes.
We learned a lot during COVID.
Incredible global rollout, much like Shakespeare turned out to be, like a global rollout of mind control.
Yeah, which they needed some kind of secret society.
Hey, it's almost like a Midsummer Night's Dream, because you go in, it's a dream, and then when it's over, it's just like, hey, guys, by the way, you've slumbered here, move on, right? It's really ties into
100%. So that's a good segue for Midsummer Night's Dream. But I just want to say one more thing, which again, this came to me after years of doing this, is that there seems to be embedded in some of the plays methodologies for expanding empire. And partly it's MK Ultra, which we're going to get to with Midsummer Night's Dream, but a way of controlling the home base and a ways of expanding the home base, obviously through war. And there seems to be, they're almost like little teaching methods. Like, for instance, Macbeth is mind controlled by the witches, and he suddenly wants to kill the king. He's an assassin, which takes us back to the Templars who hobnobbed with the assassins in Gaza. And the assassins were Muslim assassins who killed kings to gain power. So Macbeth kills the King of Scotland. He's mind controlled somehow. And what happens in Macbeth? Cut to the chase. The English army has to invade Scotland to save the day. It's an illustration of creating chaos so that you can restore order. And the hero of that play is the English army. It's incredible. And I've seen that now in quite a few of these plays. And not all of them, they're different types of plays, but I think Midsummer Night's Dream is one of those plays. And I guess we should start talking about Midsummer Night's Dream.
Let's do it.
So I've done 3 short podcasts on it, episode 18, 19, and 20. You can check them out. In fact, the very first one is called A Midsummer Night's MK Ultra, because I didn't know anything about this play, even though I think my son put it on in 3rd grade or something. Because when you see it like that, you don't really follow the play. It's just silly. It's a comedy, makes people laugh. But when I was in London and I saw a painting by Henry Fuseli, which I should have sent you. You can look it up, Henry Fuseli, Midsummer Night's Dream.
Okay.
A really intense painting. And I saw this painting in the Tate Britain Great Gallery. The Brits are great painters too. Who knew? And I was like, okay, I got to do Midsummer Night's Dream. came back to the States, looked at this play, and my jaw fell to the floor, within about 20 minutes, because I won't try to explain the whole story. It's complicated. It's 4 interweaving stories of the aristocrats, what are called the young lovers, 2 young men and 2 young women who are in love. And they run away from their mean father and wind up in the woods. The fairies, which is basically Oberon and Puck and Titania. Oberon and Titania are married. They live in the woods, more or less, but they also come into the town. And the rude mechanicals, which is another dig at the working class, who are workmen in various trades who are putting on a play. And they have to practice the play in private, so they go off to the woods to practice their play. And this all gets set up. And then the 3 groups, the aristocrats never go into the woods. So the 3 groups find themselves in the woods together. And in the woods, you have Oberon and Titania are having a quarrel. And Oberon is the king of the fairies, and Titania is queen of the fairies. And historically, this play has been known as a play about weddings and marriage, but nobody is married in this play except Oberon and Titania. They're the only man and wife at the start of the play. And they're having this terrible quarrel that's messing up the weather. Like they're actually not fairies. They're gods. They're like Zeus and Hera, really. So you're back in, the pagan era. And that's what's so brilliant about this play on multiple levels, is this blending myth and contemporary reality. In fact, the king of the aristocrats is Theseus. He's the king of Athens, Theseus. And Theseus is the famous mythic hero of the Greeks who killed the Minotaur, and actually was one of the early kings of Athens. I think he's called the Duke of Athens in the play. But there's a reference to actually Greek history and ancient Greek myth. And he's supposed to get married to Hippolyta, which is all part of the myth and the myth cycle of Theseus, which is really super deep. I spent a lot of time reading about that. And Ovid writes about that. And that's all super deep because Theseus kills the Minotaur, which was a form of human sacrifice.
In the labyrinth, right?
In the labyrinth, where we're, with Kubrick again. And that's just one part of the Theseus myth. Theseus is this huge myth that Ovid writes about, and it ties in with Ariadne, who saved him from the labyrinth. But anyway, that just brings in Greek myth right to the heart of this play. And then Oberon and
Titania are like Greek gods, right?
They're
basically like
some
that.
of the critics think that, and I do too, because they're having this quarrel. But there are many things. That's just like Freemasonic symbolism, where there's 5, 6, or 7 levels. It's the exact same with these plays. Oberon and Titania represent, many things. They could even Oberon represents so many different things. He has so much power, hidden power, and power to control men's minds. And he has a great influence on Theseus, the king, in many ways, which I'm going to bring out when I do the final analysis. It's going to be probably a 3-hour long scene by scene analysis of the play, where I try to put every single level of understanding and symbolism that I see into it, because it's just so much. But Oberon and Titania are quarreling. And why are they quarreling? Because Oberon wants a little boy. Give me the boy, he says to Titania. And okay, so we're right in the middle of Epstein and all this pedophilia in our society, and especially in England. I'm like, wait, what? He's saying, give me the boy. Why does he want a boy? And Titania's like, no, I won't give you the boy. And you find out that this boy was rescued by Titania from the mother who was dying. And she had promised this other woman, this mother who was human, that I will take care of your son. Don't worry. She made a vow to take care of this boy. And for some reason, Oberon's got to have the boy. He doesn't ever give a good reason. Puck chimes in at one point. So in typical Shakespearean ambiguity and indeterminacy, you're never quite sure why Oberon wants the boy. So what it is people put in a proper reason why Oberon wants the boy. Well, it's time for the boy to grow up and learn to be a man, and learn the martial arts and get away from his mother. Every boy's got to leave his mother at some point, but that's not ever stated in the play. Oberon just wants the boy, and it's really weird. And my jaw really hit the floor because it seemed really blatantly pedophilic and even human trafficking to some extent. What's he going to do with that boy? There's one vague reason given by Puck. Puck has tremendous power. Puck works for Oberon. Oberon tells Puck what to do, and he runs off and does it. And also does mischievous things on his own and causes mischief. And it's very, very similar to Prospero and Ariel in The Tempest, if anybody's familiar with that play. And critics, of course, have noticed that for years, that Oberon and Prospero are very similar in their relationship to Puck. Like they control a spirit that does their bidding. And, we're kind of in the realm of John Dee. And that was what his goal was, to contact the spirit world, get spirits to do their bidding, which is a big part of black magic, is contacting spirits. So Oberon wants the little boy, and Titania says she won't give it to him. What does Oberon do? He tells Puck to go find him a special flower, which has all kinds of significance, multiple levels of significance. There's one that's explained in the play. And that flower has the power, if sprinkled in someone's sleeping eyes, that the next person they see when they wake up, they'll fall deeply in love with that person. So it's kind of a cool little magical trick that you see in a lot of old stories, a little kind of plot device that obviously has comic potential. But there's no comedy to what Oberon does to his wife. They're the only married couple in the play. And while she's asleep, he sprinkles this flower that Puck goes and gets for him into her eyes. And he tells her, may you see a beast. May you see something vile when you wake up. And he's cursing her, and he's going to torture her. And he's doing it to torture her so that she gives him the boy. That's the only reason he's doing this. And when she opens her eyes, who does she see? She sees one of the rude mechanicals who were practicing their play, a play within a play, which gets complicated and multi-leveled in symbolism, who has been turned into a donkey by Puck. And she falls immediately in love with this donkey man. So, okay, on one level, it's funny, and I get it. We're donkey-like, we're silly, men can be stupid, and it's funny. Titania falls in love with him, but it's also torture, and they have sex. Like she's not just in love with him, she wants to have sex with him. She's like just lustful for this donkey. And in the play, in the Shakespeare play, it's again ambiguous and indeterminate. But if you read the text closely, she's like very excited. And there's a joke about the donkey whose name is Bottom, right? His name is Bottom, and he's turned into an ass. So ha ha ha.
Right.
Who gets sexually excited by Titania? I mean, she's this gorgeous goddess type. And they disappear for the night. They have sex, which is now shown because in the 20th century, what's going on. In the 16th or 17th century, you couldn't imagine anyone would think about that, or most people can't. Still, you can't. People have their kids put this play on. Very, very popular. in elementary school.
Right. It's seen as a kid's play. Right. I mean, that's the whole scary thing. Like, it's definitely mind control. Oberon puts her to sleep and then
Yeah.
suggests stuff while she's sleeping.
Yeah.
He's like giving her mind control stuff.
It's called
and she gets up, and then that's like
Yeah.
post-hypnotic suggestion. She gets up
Yeah.
and follows this command and does something she probably wouldn't do.
100%.
And then she gives the boy over, and then the
Yes.
same thing happens with her and Bottom. The boy disappears.
The boy is never seen again, but Oberon tells Puck she gave me the boy, so it's all cool. And
Right.
Titania doesn't know what happened. That's the thing. Just like MK Ultra.
I do but beg a little changeling boy
Yeah.
to be my henchman. Like,
Yeah.
you can interpret that in a number of different ways.
Exactly.
I think even back then you could interpret it in a number of different ways.
But nobody, because I read the history of the criticism. I didn't read everything anybody wrote about it, but there are books about the criticism of this play and the art in Shakespeare. If anyone wants to nerd out on Shakespeare, you get the art in Shakespeare, which they put out every 30 years ago, a fresh analysis of every single play. So I got one was written in the 70s and one was written just a few years ago and they've got links to hundreds of articles, and now famous people have wrote about Midsummer Night's Dream, like G.K. Chesterton and
I didn't know that.
Various people. And then independent scholars, and then finally somebody in the 60s, a very famous Shakespeare critic, he's a Polish theater critic, really knows a lot about theater. He finally said, this is a cruel play. This is now 350, 60 years later. Someone finally says it, which is what I kept seeing, because we were only at the beginning of the play. As you go through the play, it's like brutal. It's like Oberon is just beating up on everyone, but it gets laughs. But as someone who's kind of cold and dispassionately studying this play, I'm like, this is really harsh. And again, the women get the worst of it. Almost every Shakespeare play, the women get brutalized. Like, Bacon hates women, but he'll veil it. He'll give some woman a great speech in one of the plays. But yeah, it's a really brutal play. So this guy named Jan Kopp put out a very influential book called Shakespeare, Our Contemporary, where he saw like how contemporary this play was, even though it's set in ancient Greece, but also in the time of Elizabethan England. He saw how harsh it was in a modern sense and wrote about it, and it changed Shakespeare criticism. Like, oh, it is a mean play, but that's just Shakespeare being a great artist. He's showing us all of humanity. And then until finally, the most current critics, like we're talking 2000, even one book here, 2018, they finally start saying it like, oh, yeah, bestiality, pansexuality, pedophilia, homosexual pederasty. Only recently, and I have the names, and the one guy, Stephen Ogrill, he's a very famous Shakespeare critic. He studied at Columbia. He's at Stanford. He spent his entire life writing about Shakespeare. They finally start to say it. So I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy that I see pedophilia and bestiality. And
but that's kind of like the Greek love thing. That's like Greek culture. That unfortunately is an aspect of Greek culture. That was what it was back in the day. They had
kind of,
they had man-boy relationships. Like
they did.
So.
They did, but he's not really suggesting that. He's like, give me the boy. But also the symbolism, I don't have it in front of me. It'll be in the final analysis. There's clear references to bestiality in 4 other places. And then the central symbol is bestiality. Like, I don't know what you have up on the screen now, but
just have the Fuseli one that you told me about.
The Fuseli one, there she is. She's very sexually suggestive with a donkey. I mean, Fuseli knew what the deal was. I mean, the people in the know laughed about it. They knew. Yeah. Like, look how sexual that is. And amazing they could get away with it. But that's a donkey. She's about to have sex with a donkey. That's just before they go into the bower. They put flowers on Bottom's head, and Titania and the donkey disappear.
Does she have a wand?
No,
Because she seems to
doesn't.
have it in this picture.
This is a fascinating thing that I realized, is that Titania is another name for Circe, and that comes from Ovid. And Circe was the magician in Homer's Odyssey and in Greek mythology. And Circe, the female, had the power to turn men into beasts. What's happened here is that the males have stolen the power from the females, and it's the male that can turn men into beasts. That would be Puck and Oberon. And Titania's just sort of victim, and it's kind of a revenge. I think one of my podcast episodes was called The Revenge of the Magicians, because Circe would turn men into pigs. And, brutal. What a horrible thing to do. Well, this is kind of like a revenge where the men have stolen the typically feminine magic power. The ultimate magic power is to give birth to another human being. And the men have stolen it, which is another metaphor for science, like to take magic power, to have such power to create life, which is the ultimate goal of scientism, is symbolized here, where Oberon and Puck have the power to turn a man into a beast and then torture the woman by making her have sex with the beast. So that's kind of the ultimate layer of symbolism that I've come up with, and it's successful. She gives the boy back. She gives up the boy and sort of doesn't care about it. And she's just like, oh God, what happened? Was I fell in love with that thing? Oh, how weird. Oh, I don't know. I don't even want to think about it. What happened? I don't know what happened. You'll have to tell me what happened. She's just completely compliant. He's made his wife completely compliant with drugs and trauma. That's the central story of this play. And Bottom, who is actually an interesting character, is the only really character in the play. He's actually quite funny. He thinks he can do everything. He wants to play every part in the play. He's kind of a typical guy who thinks too highly of himself and thinks he can do everything. He's full of himself. It's a good comic role, actually. Gets turned into an ass, and he doesn't know what happened to him, but he just had sex with a goddess, which is, in a sense, it's an initiation, because Apuleius, the golden ass, which is one of the layers of symbolism of this. It's a very famous novel. It's considered one of the first novels ever written, or that we still have. It's from the Roman times, and it's about a man who by doing magic mistakenly turns himself into a donkey. It's called The Golden Ass. It's very, very funny. It's Roman times. It's very, very sexual. It's one of the sources for this play acknowledged by critics. Ovid, Apuleius, just lots and lots of sources for this play. He has sex with a woman in The Golden Ass, and he's not returned to himself until he's initiated. And The Golden Ass is considered one of the closest, the best knowledge we have of what initiation was like, because he goes and gets initiated into the mystery school of Isis, which was very big in Rome at the time. And Bottom, when he comes out of his night with Titania, doesn't know what hit him. He makes a speech that's kind of heretical. It references St. Paul's speech about love. I don't have it in front of me. I should have put that in front of me.
Is it the eye of man have not heard, the ear of man have not seen yet?
Yeah, it's from one of Paul's letters.
But it's an inversion. He's doing magical. This is not Christian.
Because he had sex.
That's the Gnostic view.
Yeah, it wasn't an encounter with Christ or God. It was sex with a goddess. It's a pagan inversion of Christianity. Yeah, it's really amazing that he could get away with that at the time. I guess it's just vague enough and sort of comical enough. And he goes, anyone who tries to talk about what happened is an ass. But
do you think that bottom is a symbol for humanity? Like that's what's happening is like
I
you
think
could turn into an ass and then
yeah, he's a symbol
trying to
for a
kill them.
type of humanity. I think he's actually the most interesting of all of those workmen. He has the most verve and the most energy, and I think so. He's actually chosen to be initiated and made part of the club. Is one way I think about it. And he comes out saying, "Oh, you can't talk about this." He was initiated. You can't talk about it. But I'll get oh, what's his name? Forget his name to write a ballad about it. Quince. I'll get Peter Quince. Peter Quince wrote the play Pyramus and Thisbe that they're going to put on for the aristocrats later. I'll get Peter Quince to write a ballad about it because you cannot speak directly about initiation. To this day, we don't know what really happened in any of these mystery school initiations because it was unlawful to speak of it. So he's also referencing that. Like, I can't talk about this, but you can make art about it. You can do a ballad about it. So he's going to get Peter Quince to do a ballad about it. So one level of this is that he was initiated. He's now part of the inner circle, and he's an actor. He's part of the theater world, and Freemasonry and the theater is well known. As I mentioned, David Garrick, the Freemason, really created bardolatry in England. But again, multiple levels of symbolism for everything that happens in this play that links it to ancient Greek symbolism to contemporary day. Yeah, I would agree with you. He's an everyman symbol. As definitely one level of symbolism.
Look at this. This is a great one. You were mentioning David Garrick a couple of times.
Yeah.
Let me pull up this
Sure.
picture of him. Here he is. He's making the Masonic sign of the secret knowledge right here. It's literally a painting from William Hogarth, who's pretty famous.
There you go.
There he is. I have the secret knowledge and some laurels on my jacket. And what else am I doing? I'm a writer.
So in terms of Freemasonry, Midsummer is very, very important to Freemasons. So right off the bat, a Freemason's going to go, Midsummer. It's the solstice. Midsummer means the solstice. The solstice is like primary symbol of Freemasonry because the key symbol is the sun and Adonis. Adonis is, again, ancient Greek myth, which even goes further back. The Adonis symbolism is really, really profound, really ancient. Adonai is Adonis, and that means Lord or God in Hebrew religion. Adonai, God, God. Like, it's such a deep, profound symbol, Adonis. And it's the very first poem that Shakespeare ever wrote was called Venus and Adonis. So he's referencing that again. The Hiram Abiff myth of Freemasonry, which nowadays most people know about that. If you're at all interested in Freemasonry, Hiram Abiff is killed, and it's thought to be a reference to Adonis, who was killed every year originally. He was the consort of the goddess. He was Tammuz, who was the consort of Ishtar or Astarte. And in that really distant past, every year he was sacrificed and his blood watered the crops so the crops would grow again. And he lived on, because all these ancient myths got softened, he lived on as the most handsome man ever born, with the really fascinating myth of his birth in Greek myth. And Venus fell in love with him. And they have a relationship. They're profound lovers, and then he's killed by a boar and dies, but he's reborn. So he's one of the dying and rising gods that was sacrificed, that was killed on Midsummer, or in the Greek religion, they would mourn the death of Adonis when the sun was at its peak, because that's when he starts to lose his power. Right after the solstice, the days get shorter and shorter. So that's when they would mourn him in ancient Greece. And so right off the bat, you get a Masonic symbol. And then throughout the play, there's constant references to the moon and Diana. So sun and moon are key Masonic symbols, and you'll see that, especially in Bacon's time. Like when I was talking about the very earliest Masonic symbolism, it almost always involves the sun and the moon. And if you go to, the website, there'll be some of that stuff. I'm sorry, I should have had it.
But there's like 20 references to the moon in this.
Yeah, so this is
waning. They've got it down like waning and waxing. That's very occultic or esoteric, whatever you want to call it.
And then the next level in this play is the alchemy. There's just tons of alchemy. So right away, that's alchemy when they merge a woman and a beast, or they turn a man into a beast, and this transmutation of one thing into another, which is Ovid again, and metamorphosis and transmutation, which is alchemy. And alchemy was really at its peak when this play was written. And it's a whole other language. And I really think that it was Francis Bacon who realized that alchemy, which is primarily about transmuting metals, took on this much larger symbolism, which is only now being recognized recently. Again, like it took hundreds of years for people to see this, but there's tons of alchemy in Shakespeare. And there's tons of it in this play, which is one thing I'm going to pinpoint when I go through it scene by scene. And it's kind of hard to just pick it out now, but there's some things like silver green streams and golden, whenever there's gold, that's kind of a reference.
Well, it's the pathway goes from black to red to gold, right? I think there's maybe there's green,
gold, there's green, there's
black, green, red, gold, negredo, rubedo, all those things.
There's red and white, which is the English flag. Those are key alchemical symbols. It's really dense alchemy. Like that's one pathway you just mentioned, but they had this whole language, and people are just now picking it out. I've picked out some of it from this play, but a Freemason would instantly realize he's
union of opposites is very magical. That's alchemical, and that's the union of opposites and things. Opposition coming together is very alchemical, but also magical. So, and also like the male and female coming together are symbolic of that. So union of opposites.
Union of opposites, and that was what the Gnostics were into. In Western alchemy, it was the Gnostics that started it because they want control of life. They want to be able to they want to be God, and they want to be able to turn whatever they want into whatever they want.
Right. Isn't that Oberon?
And that's kind of what Oberon is.
Yeah.
And it's what modern science goal is, to really, make whatever we want. We're going to make life. We're not going to die. This is Rosicrucian. Another thing Bacon was involved in. Evidence is overwhelming. I know it sounds crazy, but the Rosicrucians announced, we're going to put an end to death and sickness, and the world is going to change. This is 1616, 1615, right around when Shakespeare died. They announced the great transformation of the world, and they said we're going to use magic and Kabbalah and Christ. They put a really heavy Christian veneer on it, which is abandoned in Shakespeare, by the way. Nobody seems to.
There's nothing. I can't think of it. Yeah, there isn't. There isn't any.
Meanwhile, the Catholics are trying to claim Shakespeare as one of their own. It's very bizarre. It's very, very bizarre. And I got distracted by that buzzer.
It's other Gnostic religion. I mean,
alchemy is Gnostic and the control of life, and which is really why I'm doing this, is that Bacon created modern science as a Gnostic science in order to control life, and he literally says in one of his books, which nobody seemed to notice, that humanity can conquer the universe. And that's kind of where science has gone off base, where he claimed it was to make life better, to relief of man's estate, which can have a Gnostic subtext too. But they really want to control life, and they it's not really science, it's scientism. It's this idea that science is the most important thing, and scientists should rule. And it's elite technocracy that Peter Thiel is talking about, who literally name drops Francis Bacon. We're coming up to the 400th anniversary of Bacon's death. He died in 1626. Some people think he faked his death. I don't go there. But yeah, Peter Thiel's been going around name dropping Francis Bacon a lot.
This stuff is still relevant. They're invisible. In my understanding of the play, I haven't seen it in a while, but the fairies are invisible. They symbolize the invisible fraternity.
There you go.
Invisible college. They're tinkering around with all these people, just like the invisible college today. All these guys in freaking Silicon Valley, there is a modern invisible college.
Yeah.
A lot of these elites are involved. They have these Baconian, Shakespearean ideas, not in toto, but they're influenced by some of them for sure.
Well said. That is exactly the symbolism there.
Yeah. So there is this invisible brotherhood motif in this play in particular, if not all of Shakespeare's stuff.
And then it gets really complicated because there's an influence of this invisible power with the visible power. So Duke Theseus and Hippolyta, who supposedly the play is about, who are gonna get married, and all of this stuff going on in the woods, and the workmen practicing the play is all to get ready. Well, no, but it's leading up to the wedding of Theseus and Hippolyta. And we didn't even talk about how Oberon controls the lives of the young lovers who have run away from civilization and find themselves in the woods. But it's all leading up to the wedding of Duke Theseus and Hippolyta, and how there is a relationship of power between the visible power, which is the Duke and his court, and the invisible power, which is the secret college, but also the world of the spooks, the intelligence, the
magical world. You could see it as the magical world,
the magical world
means a lot. It means that's a big tent, the magical world. Yeah. And symbolized by the forest and the green and all that stuff. Shamans.
The modern take is the unconscious. Yes. And it really is a brilliant play in philosophical terms that Bacon knew that reality is in some sense a construct. Like, we do create reality with our feelings and our imagination. Even if there's a reality out there, which there is, we all see it differently based on our mood and our feelings and our education and our thoughts, which can all be influenced. We are all open to suggestion. And that's in this play in a brilliant way, because it starts with myth, with Duke Theseus. It starts with kind of fear of the night. It's dreams, right? What is the difference between dream and reality? That's kind of been talked about over the centuries. How do I know this isn't a dream? Or you wake up from a dream and the dream was so real, and you're really affected by it all day. And some dreams you might remember your entire life. It's very profound.
That's what Puck says at the end of the play.
Yes, Puck.
Pardon it. Sorry, we did anything wrong. So they know they're doing something wrong, and view it was a dream.
Just a dream. Forget about it. And people, we didn't talk about it. Maybe you watch the play. Everybody's got to watch it. There's a good free version on YouTube by a Shakespearean director named Peter Hall. It's got 3 famous female actresses. Was that Diana Rigg? What's her name? And I have trouble remembering these actresses' names. Super famous, still famous today and still alive. And it's really good versions. It's the 1968, 1969 version. You can watch for free on YouTube. It's also faithful to the original text, and you'll see how myth, dream,
the 68 film.
68. It's a good version. It's kind of hippie because it's the 60s.
That's Helen Mirren and
Helen Mirren. Thank you. Super famous. Did a lot of Shakespeare. Shakespeare's like the core of the entertainment industry still. Like every famous.
It's the core of all writing industry. It should be like almost if you want to be a famous film writer, it's like, well, learn Shakespeare.
Study Shakespeare, and you want to be famous, you got to do Shakespeare. They all do it. Some people do it. They make a career out of doing it. Even though people
Judi
aren't
Dench.
Judi Dench,
is
she's in.
Ian Holmes in there. Oh man, all the classics are in there.
Oh my
Jeez.
God, Ian Holm, who I just saw doing Richard III. That's right, he's Puck. And who's the other famous one? Diana Rigg. She was in the Avengers or something. She
Sounds
plays
very familiar.
one of the young lovers. They're called the two girls who are best friends. Yeah, her.
She was in Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Oh, she was in Bond.
She's a Bond girl, yeah.
Good find. Yeah, her. Diana Rigg. Yeah, Diana Rigg. Who's the moon goddess. They two women are best friends, and they try to claw each other's eyes out in the middle of the night in the woods, and everyone's laughing. Ho, 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 ho. And I'm going like, this is brutal. This is horrible.
Yeah. There's Ian Holm on the cover in the green, smiling.
How do you know Ian Holm? Is he a famous?
Well, he
actor,
was the guy who played the Hobbit. He was in both of the Lord of the Rings trilogies.
No kidding.
Yeah, I think both of them.
I just found out how he was.
He was also in my favorite depiction of Jesus, the one by Zeffirelli, I think it was.
No kidding.
With Robert, another English actor played Christ. I forgot his name, but Ian Holm played, I think, one of the temple priests or something. But yeah, Holmes.
No kidding. I just found out who he was yesterday. He did Richard.
This guy doesn't look familiar to you? This guy was in so many.
Now things. He does, but yeah.
Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies, Brazil, classic, Chariots of Fire.
Wow.
Alien. He was the robot in Alien.
Okay.
Yeah. He was also in Jesus, like the one Jesus.
Look at that. Wow.
Midsummer Night's Dream. That was his first one. 1968 when I was born.
Oh wow, my God. Crazy. That's a big role.
Yeah, that's a long one. He was an alien. Where's the one where he's in the Jesus of Nazareth? Zerah. He played Zerah. This is my favorite Jesus of Nazareth, by the way. Robert Powell.
I never saw
well
it.
Worth your time. Yeah.
No kidding. I'll check it out.
Yeah, I think it's like 8 hours. There are little clips of it all through YouTube.
Huh.
But it was 4 episodes, but it had, I mean, the cast is incredible. Laurence Olivier, Donald Pleasence, Plummer, Anthony Quinn, Rod Steiger, Ustinov, Michael York.
Holy smokes.
Borgnine, Anne Bancroft, Robert Powell, yeah.
Oh my God.
I love Robert Powell. He's my favorite.
Oh, I don't know him.
I got a little sidetracked.
That's cool. That's part of the fun.
Yeah.
Maybe just to wrap it up, I'll say that
great.
Oberon also mind controls the men, the young lovers, who completely change. You know, they profess their undying love, you know, for their girlfriend, that woman they love, the young woman they love, and Oberon can flip it completely. So the next minute when they get that drug and they get that hypnotic suggestion, they swear they never loved that woman and they love the other woman now.
Wow. So they really, there's like behavioral change or thought reform.
Radical behavior change at the deepest level. Drives the women crazy. The women start trying to fight and claw their eyes out, you know, total chaos. And then when they wake up in the morning, they don't know what happened. And they're not sure what happened. There's loss of time.
So there's amnesia, right? This is all classic mind control motifs.
It's incredible.
No, because I've been doing all these shows on Manchurian Candidate, and the whole motif or the whole theme of the whole thing is what happened to us. Was it a dream?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's the same thing. Did this happen in a dream? Yeah. It happened. It really did happen to them, but they think it's a dream.
Yeah. It's all here. And he was a spook. He was a spy. He was, and it makes a calmness in the populace. It calms the people. It makes them easier to rule. There's that aspect of it, you know, because there's tension in the society, like Romeo and Juliet. There's tension in the city, and the magician, who in Romeo and Juliet is the friar, you know, takes steps to calm it and make everything good again, not without this like terrible chaos. So it's illustrated, that technique of controlling the population.
Right.
It's an illustration of it that Masons will understand, because they can read the secret language.
Right. That's the invisible influence. They're the fairies, right?
Yeah.
So they're the ones that are kind of like, oh, we're not working together, but behind the scenes, it's all coordinated. It's
Yeah.
common positions like
And then there's the
that they
play
do.
within the play, which is
Right.
another heavy
Right.
level of symbolism.
Yeah.
And they do a play called Pyramus and Thisbe, which he appears to be mocking Romeo and Juliet, which I think is a play about mockery, where they kill themselves. Pyramus and Thisbe, it's an obvious relation to Romeo and Juliet. These two young lovers kill themselves. But while they're doing the play, which has this whole other level of symbolism, because they're, it's what's real in the theater. At what point do we accept it as real? How much is our imagination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all this homosexual in jokes. I'll kiss your stones and stuff like that, because they're talking to each other through a wall, which is another myth. They're bringing in one more myth, Pyramus and Thisbe, which Ovid spoke about, and these two young lovers who are separated by a wall, and they can only talk to each other through a chink in the wall. And the rude mechanicals, the workmen, are putting on this play. And so there's all this, again, this blending of theater, dream, imagination, reality, and myth, and how they all blend in us to create our worldview, and how Francis Bacon can kind of command all those things to create reality, to create a greater reality. And in my sense, I think he created the English Empire with this kind of incredible power that he had, and people just now seeing some of the darker levels in this play. It's so weird, man.
Yeah.
It's really weird. And the critics are now saying it, that they didn't say for 400 years.
It's almost like also he's like saying, hey, some of these people at the top are dark occultists. These aren't Christians too,
Absolutely.
He's saying it 400 years ago. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and they were doing it then. They're doing it now. I didn't want to believe that, but I think this play is saying that there's really dark, ugly stuff at the
influencing the mundanes.
Yes.
The mechanicals or whatever it is.
Yeah, who are all decent guys. They're all really good guys.
Good. And they're decent, and they're mocking the mysteries, but the mysteries have control over them.
So they're mocking decency, these rude mechanicals who are just really good, decent guys. Bottom's kind of full of himself, but they just want to do a good job and put on a play and make a couple of bucks on the side, and they're worried about the ladies. It's really fascinating subplot. Like they keep saying, "Oh," because there's a lion in the play. It's just the funniest part, and they're worried that if they roar too loud, they'll scare the ladies. And then they'll hang us. So they're worried that the aristocrats will hang them. So they're scared. But they're also so decent and kind. They care about the ladies. Like, don't scare the ladies, man. But of course, Oberon spends the entire night like torturing the ladies. It's really fascinating on so many levels.
The interplays, yeah, it's really incredible.
It's
almost like the characters are really just, figments for the concepts they want to portray. Like the concepts are more important than the characters themselves. That's all. Yes. Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Robert, we hit the night. Well, we're close to the 90-minute mark. We had 230 listeners, watchers. Thanks for everybody for watching. I have his website right here. People, if you're watching this on Twitter or anything, check it out. thehiddenlifeisbest.com. So you can find out all his episodes. He has merchandise. I'm jealous. I don't have any merchandise.
I couldn't do that. It was too expensive. I had some t-shirts.
Oh, okay.
But if you want one of those t-shirts, send me an email and we'll work something out. I couldn't, by the time I pay them and make $5, it just got so expensive. It looks silly. Maybe I'll bring it back. But sign up on Patreon for free subscriber and you'll get updates and stuff. Or, if you have $5 a month, that would be wonderful for some encouragement. And then you can access the second half of a lot of the podcasts where we do deep dives into these plays. We really go through it scene by scene. It's really fun, really, really interesting.
There's so much there. And the other thing is, like, when you're in a theater in this language that's very different, 400 years old, you miss some of the subtleties.
Yes, you do. So, it goes by you.
Yeah,
it lodges in your subconscious.
Yeah, it's there, but even plays I know well, some of the subtleties I miss.
Yeah, you got to read it and really think
Yeah.
about it. And
then it enriches the play. Then when you see
Yes.
it, you're like, oh, I know exactly what's going on. Let's see how good this guy
Yes.
can perform this
Yeah.
or whatever.
and it makes you smarter. You know,
I think so. Yeah, it does.
gives you discernment when you look at other entertainment, the deeper level of understanding. I think it's really good for you.
I think
Pick
so, because
one of
it
these
understands the world you're in. Some of the stuff
Yes.
is hidden.
Yes.
Some of this hidden life is best stuff really is hidden. So
Yeah.
it's part of the kind of duper's delight insider, knowledge people, where people who really are knowledgeable can really kind of secretly mock, maybe like this play does, secretly mock the kind of mundanes. So knowing what they're up to is it's enriching. So you see it. I mean, it's playing out in the real world right now.
I totally agree with you.
And this dream sequence, like he knew the dreams is like,
Yeah.
that's a suggestive state, and it's a different state of stuff. Well, your Patreon is the Hidden Life is Best Patreon.
Yes,
is that right?
Patreon, Hidden Life is Best.
Okay.
Just become a free subscriber and you'll get updates, or the Substack too. The essays are there. Yeah, go check those essays out. They're not behind a paywall or anything. Most stuff is free. Yeah,
there's all your links to your social media too. There it is.
Yeah.
Patreon should be this. Is this it?
That's
there
Patreon. Yeah, there's Patreon.
All right, so people can check that out. So all the links: Spotify, iTunes, X, and Substack. All the big ones.
There, it's all there.
Anything else you'd like to add? Anything I missed?
I think that's it, William. This has been a blast. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Went fast. Great talk with you again. Thanks so much for coming back on.
Sure.
Thanks to all the listeners. Check this out. Share it too. If you should like this material, you find it enriching or edifying, put it on your social media and share it. I don't have an ad budget. I don't think Robert does. Maybe he does.
No.
I don't have money to spend on
an
ad budget. So if you like this, please, sharing is caring. I appreciate it. I think Robert would appreciate it too.
That'd be
great. His podcast is The Hidden Life is Best, Francis Bacon and the Gnostic English Empire. And go back and you can listen to our other 5 episodes as well. So this will be the 6th one. And I will again put links to his website and the Patreon in the show notes. So Robert, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, William. Take care.
Well, until next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.